All right, ladies and gentlemen, MrSotko here. Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about coronavirus, those American stimulus checks, all the conspiracy theories around the coronavirus too, and how it sort of plays into Bitcoin and the crypto world as well. So the stock market down, the whole world not doing so good at the moment. As far as the stock market is down, today we closed at like 20,087, at least for the Dow. And that's not so bad. We were at 29,000 very briefly, and it's sort of akin to Bitcoin at 20,000 very briefly. And then when it's at $10,000, you say, oh, Bitcoin is way down in price. But you could look at it from an optimist point of view and say that, well, a year before that, it was only $1,000 or less. So it's still way up. And even Bitcoin at its price now is still way up from earlier before, but I suppose it's just a matter of when you got in. As the Dow was at 20,000 points, 29,000 some months ago, a month ago, and then rocked all the way down to 19,000 some. So not too big of a deal, but I think what the bigger deal is that so far, at least in terms of America, most governments in the states have force closed all non-essential businesses, which means basically if you're a gas station, you can stay open, a grocery store, and some other businesses can essentially claim that they're an essential business. But a lot of the mom and pop stores, restaurants are closed down and can only do takeout, and some of them probably can't do that necessarily well. So there's a lot of people out of work, a lot of factory workers, all kinds of things. So just nobody's getting a paycheck if you're a part of those jobs. Like if you're a school teacher, you're fine because you're on salary. But if you were the janitor for the school, well, there's nothing really to clean up after a couple days, and it's time to go home, and you're probably not getting paid. So there's just probably millions of people out of work right now. And the U.S., and we'll talk about the stimulus checks that all Americans apparently are getting here soon. But as of March 19th, there were more than 13,000 cases in the U.S., and there's been at least 185 deaths. And that is quite the tragedy, of course. But compared to some other countries, it's not even close. So America getting the brunt of it now. It's starting to really, really catch on. As you can see by this map, we got 154 cases in Texas, 873 in California, over nearly 1,200 in Washington State, even the state I'm in currently. Pennsylvania is 185. What's silly is that West Virginia was the very last holdout in the United States, with 0 cases for quite some time, now only with just 2. Apparently, nobody wants to go to West Virginia. In case you're not from the United States, West Virginia is in the middle of the mountains, and there's really not a lot going on in West Virginia. It's mostly really, really small towns, like super segregated from each other. And there's basically no reason to travel to West Virginia. No offense, West Virginia, but nobody travels to West Virginia unless it's like for business. Virginia makes sense, and et cetera around there. So the U.S. starting to really kick in now. However, probably the worst country hit by this is Italy. Their death toll in the last 24 hours went from 427 to 3,405, overtaking the numbers of deaths so far registered in China. So Italy actually got it worse than apparently China so far, or at least equally, and they've had it much, much less, for a shorter period of time than China did, considering it originated there. So yeah, things not so good. Again, in the United States, a lot of businesses are forced closed by the government. You can't operate your business. Again, some restaurants can do takeout, but all those mom and pop businesses that you see on the side of the streets, they all have to close, and so they're just not getting any money. Yet the bills are still coming in, the electricity bill, the mortgages, etc. So the U.S. is in sort of a scramble right now to give out checks to Americans and also bail out banks. So this is similar to the 2008 housing crisis in basically the whole planet that it affected. And in 2008, bankers gave out all the bad loans, etc. There was a whole bunch of problems with the banking and housing industry, etc. and things went very bad. They were going bad for quite a while, but 2008 was sort of the breaking point. And during that Bush administration, they gave out stimulus checks. I don't know if you guys remember these, but they were like $300 to $600. And I got one. I believe it was only $300, but some people also got $600, maybe if you had kids, etc. Which honestly was nice, but sort of a joke. I mean, $300, it's really a drop in the bucket. I think at the time I was a lifeguard, and so $300 was reasonable. It was slightly less than, like a paycheck I would get. So it was nice to have, but again, you pretty much burn that immediately, especially with gas prices were over $5 a gallon. At the time I was driving an 87 Dodge Power Ram. Thing weighed 3,900 pounds unladen with a 318 horsepower 8-cylinder engine. And from the 80s as well, carbureted, so you could just imagine the gas mileage on that, probably 12 miles to the gallon or less at $5 a gallon. It was not fun. So what are the checks, or when are the checks coming, and how much will they be for? So the Treasury Department has called payments to be issued April 6th and May 18th. So there should be two of them. And again, sort of akin to the 2008, there was only one check then, and the government was essentially giving bailouts to these big corporations in banking. And at first it was like, oh, we need a few $100 billion. And then it was like, oh, we need $800 billion. And then it's like, okay, we gave them $800 billion. And then we found out that it was more like $1.5 trillion. And some people even say it was more than $1.5 trillion that we gave to the auto industry and the banking industry. And that same thing's happening again. They plan on giving out another $1.5 trillion to the airlines, the auto industry, banking, Wall Street, etc. Except this time, they're actually going to give a reasonable stimulus check to the world. And I've heard a lot of conspiracies about this one too, that they're going to try the UBI thing, like the whole Yang gang. There was a candidate running for president, Yang, and he wanted to give everybody $1,000 a month, and that would just go right back into the economy, etc. And you could argue if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's not what I'm here to do right now. But I've heard a lot of conspiracies. Oh, it's the Democrats are using this to try and etc. However, the government proposed that each tranche total $250 billion nationwide, which each person's exact amount determined by their income and family size. Senators who will ultimately vote on any bill have proposed cash payments from $1,000 to $2,000 per person. I've also heard that if you have a child or children, that you get an additional $500 per child. So again, it's all over the place. Some senators are saying, oh, we should give $4,500 to each person twice, etc. So giving, of course, that $1.5 trillion to Wall Street and various corporations. So about April 6th, I guess they're sending out checks. This hasn't been entirely validated yet. Not that it is being discussed. It's just a bill at the moment, like modeling specific options. But they proposed that both payments to each person be the same amount. So they haven't actually said yes, this is what we're going to do, but they want to get it all out in 2 weeks. And I begin to wonder, so, what will people use this money for? And I think a lot of people are going to get that new Glock 19, that Gen 5. And I think a lot of people are going to pay their bills with it as well, or buy a lot of food. So it depends on the person. Do you need the money? If you don't need the money, you're probably going to spend it on something frivolous. If you do need the money, you're probably going to pay off your credit cards and your bills, etc. But I also begin to wonder, will this pump the price of crypto a little bit? As a lot of people who are crypto fans that may receive this might go, might as well put a little bit of this into crypto. Like if you don't need the money, you might as well invest it. And now is a reasonably good time to be buying into just about anything like the stock market or crypto or something, because I think it's going to be bouncing back sooner or later, as crypto always does. Anybody that's been into crypto for any period of time knows this isn't the first time. This isn't our first rodeo. So there's a lot of conspiracies too, of course, like the conspiracy broadcaster Alex Jones, who is pretty hilarious, to be totally honest. You don't believe anything he says, but guy's kind of funny. At least he was on Joe Rogan, because he was completely high out of his mind and drunk. If you guys haven't seen that, you got to see it. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. For example, who's been warning of imminent cataclysms for more than 20 years, he used the outbreak to step up his pitching for his bulk food products and other survival goods sold on his website, InfoWars. So if you guys have ever watched Alex Jones for more than like 2 minutes, he like shills his InfoWars survival stuff, like his bone meal broth, like milkshakes and other stupid iodine tablets, which are actually good in a nuclear war, but for the most part, you're just basically, you might as well just give them a donation, right? Like you're probably never gonna have to use iodine tablets. I'm not gonna lie to you, but you know, there was also people like on the neo-Nazi right and Telegram channels were accelerationists who seek to hasten the end of liberal democracy in order to build a white ethno-state. I didn't hear of that one, but apparently people can make a conspiracy theory out of just about anything. Again, there's of course the conspiracy theory that the virus was man-made, which I find a little bit weird, because if the virus was man-made, fair enough, right? But if it was like deliberately put on the people, then it's a pretty bad virus to to use against your own people, you know, as an experiment. Because quite frankly, now, of course, I don't want this taken out of context. Quite frankly, it's not a very lethal virus. Plain and simple. Like, if you really wanted to attack a society with a virus, like, you would use Ebola or probably many others that are much, much more lethal than basically the flu, which has so far killed, I think, 0 children, and mostly elderly, which the flu typically does. However, the flu typically will also kill small children as well, or can be lethal. But in this case, I think 0 worldwide. So it doesn't seem to affect children that much. So again, if it was like deliberate, it's obviously, it would have to be not for its lethality, but rather for its distraction. And I've heard that the distraction is supposed to be so Democrats can like win the election of Donald Trump. That the U.S., you know, that China was doing it so that they could get rid of Trump because he's putting tariffs on China. So that's one of the conspiracies as well. Another one is that there is no coronavirus. You heard that one. That there is no coronavirus, that it's actually 5G that is being implemented worldwide, and that 5G makes you sick. Which, now, don't get me wrong, like, the 5G whole conspiracy thing of making people sick, you know, or giving people cancer, etc., or messing people up in some way, is probably true. Like, if your head was, like, near the tower somewhere. Like, if you're a worker, you probably turn that off, right, before you climb up the pole and start getting in there, right? I mean, it's a lot of waves coming at your face. It's probably not good. However, I mean, we use signals like that all the time, microwaves with our phones and indoor Wi-Fi, you know, your antenna, your radio waves, they're everywhere. And I kind of doubt that 5G is actually as lethal as the conspiracy states. Again, the Dow at 20,000. And, you know, it's really not that low. As you can see, like 5 years ago, you know, 2016, we were at like 16,000, and it's just been up and up and ever since. So, like, saying that this is down, a little silly at the moment. But to another article, Bitcoin is your hedge against currency deflation. So I just kind of want to talk to this about as a topic. So since the week of March 9th, the world has definitely entered a crisis. The increasing rapid spread of COVID-19 poses a major risk, a slowdown in the world's major economies. People aren't going to work. There's the whole Russia overproducing oil, as well as Saudi Arabia, the oil wars to try and outbid each other, to try and beat American shale, natural gas, natural, you know, etc. As the starting point of this global pandemic, the Chinese economy was the first to be heavily impacted, which can affect everything else as well. And so the symbol of this widespread panic is to be found in the abysmal fall of Wall Street. In 1 month, the Dow Jones has lost more than 35%. But against this backdrop, we've been witnessing a real liquidity crisis over the past week. All liquid markets are being impacted. Gold has been affected, as well as Bitcoin lost 50% of its value on March 12th 2020, going from 8K to just under 4K. And all Wall Street traders are appealing to the Federal Reserve to come to the rescue in a bad situation. Under pressure from Wall Street, the Federal Reserve made emergency decisions to cut interest rate by 100% basis, basically to 0%. Another round of quantitative easing for $700 billion right now, and details the Fed will buy $500 billion in treasuries and $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and a 0% reserve requirement rate for banks. So basically, printing up a bunch of money. So the idea is, in the article is that because the money is being printed so fast right now, and that's I think is an interesting thing to say, because the U.S. and not just the U.S. I mean, every country, it doesn't matter what country you're in, your country central bank is just mass producing cottony, linen-y money over and over. And it's essentially like saying, oh, Bitcoin is down in price and we're having a crash in Bitcoin, so we better produce more Bitcoin. And the developers or whoever is like, yeah, let's just inject 1 million Bitcoin into the market, so that instead of having like 10 Bitcoin in your wallet, you now have 100 in your wallet. So you're just essentially producing free Bitcoin for everybody, and like that'll ease up the liquidity crisis, right? Because now everybody will just put more Bitcoin on the exchanges, right? That'll work, and that's what we want to avoid in the Bitcoin world, at least for Bitcoin. Now, an inflationary economy is not necessarily bad, because you could argue that a deflationary economy is just as worse. If you keep taking away something, you don't want to spend it, because that $20 bill in your pocket is going to be worth more than $20 bills, a $20 bill in a few years if you put it into your savings account. A deflationary economy, you would put everything into savings, you would never spend it, and then therefore nobody would be getting any money, businesses would be doing very bad. So it's sort of like, which one do you choose when you're running this like fiat economy? We have to keep putting money out there, but doing that, of course, deflates it. So again, the deflation of money is just going to require more dollar bills to buy each Bitcoin, and will raise its price as a hedge, essentially, because I mean, Bitcoin isn't getting inflated, it's the dollar bill. So when $10,000 bills bought one Bitcoin at one point, it's going to take you $15,000 bills to buy that same Bitcoin after you dump $1.5 trillion into the market, etc. It's probably a bit of a hyperbole, but so the question is Bitcoin ever a hedge? And I think that's actually a really, really deep question you need to ask, because over time, of course, Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and I love Bitcoin because of its rarity and because of the proof of work, and that's what you have to focus on too. But over time, it was like, okay, this is a method of transaction in a private way, and then it's like, no, it's not private. I mean, anybody can really do a lot of research on your Bitcoin address and find your spending habits, so it's not private. So everyone's like, okay, well, it's not private, but at least it's decentralized. And then you go, well, yeah, it's decentralized, but I mean, Bitmain and various other pools basically centralize all the hash rate. And you go, okay, well, it's not a big problem. Now Bitcoin is, we can use it for this or that. And it kind of gets disproven every time. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's going to get adopted worldwide. And you're like, no way, because the transaction rate is 7 TPS. There's no way. It's like 8 TPS. And then the final one, the most recent one in the past year or two, is that, okay, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. It's a hedge against the stock market. So if the stock market goes down, of course, everybody's going to sell all their stock and put it into Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's up 10% today and the stock market's down 10%. Of course, you're going to put it in this rising asset. Or that Bitcoin is digital gold and that it goes up in price and etc. when the market goes down. But so far, that's proven to not be the case. Now, you could argue that it was one of the Chinese Ponzi schemes, dumping all their Bitcoin plus token, whatever it was, and that caused a crash, or it could be this, or it could be these whales, or it could be that. But I mean, it correlated directly. Now that the stock market has gone up a little bit, in the past pretty much day. Bitcoin went up quite a bit today. The whole market went up quite a bit today. Is that correlated? And that's the question. Is it correlated or is it uncorrelated? Because if it is correlated with the stock market, you would just be essentially better off just buying Apple stock or anything else, because we were investing into Bitcoin because it was a hedge. And so if Bitcoin is not a hedge and it is correlated, it can put Bitcoin into sort of an existential crisis. Well, I can't use it for transactions. It's not good for me to hold on to it. It's not digital gold. It's not a hedge. But with this article, it does kind of make a slight argument that, of course, with more and more dollars being printed, it's sort of a hedge against inflation. So I think that might be its last bastion. Is it? So far, it does seem pretty correlated. That is the first market crash we have seen since the inception of Bitcoin, plain and simple. If you want to look at Max, the Dow Jones Max, it's going to be kind of hard because this is I need to get a bigger picture here. Bitcoin was created, let's see, January 2009. Let's see if we can even get that. It's kind of hard because there's such a big. You can see January 2009 was nearly at a bottom, at a trough here in the stock market. That was nearly the bottom right after 2009. So it essentially was created at the very bottom of the stock market, for a long time, even before that, at the very bottom for the most part. And ever since, it's been riding up with a really great stock market, and it's been going up in price and wildly changing on its own as well. But now, it's quite the coincidence that the stock market crashed and so did Bitcoin, right at the same time as this whole coronavirus / stock market thing. Another thing, a good thing in Bitcoin is that the Coinbase gives the Bitcoin blockchain a big boost. And this is actually a pretty shameful article, not because it was written poorly, not that. It's because Coinbase is just now starting batched transactions. So Coinbase for all these years was basically sending out every transaction individually when you send it out. Now, batching could slow their transactions down a little bit. You might have to wait a scotch longer, but they're basically taking a bunch of people's Bitcoin at once and then sending it out in one transaction as opposed to just all these little ones. So the number of daily transactions on Bitcoin's blockchain has dropped sharply to the levels of March 2019. At first glance, it might seem bad for Bitcoin since it sounds like fewer people are making the transactions, but that's not the case. He said, so that Nick Carter, the founder of Crypto Data, he said that there's an underlying reason for this drop, and the end result is good for Bitcoin. In a series of tweets, Carter noted that there was a definite uptick in batching last week or so. He saw that Bitcoin transactions are getting bigger on average, while the number of transactions has dropped. So this coincided with Coinbase launching its new batching initiative, which is just, it should have been done so long ago, so many years ago. Who would have, because it's just like Visa, MasterCard, all the different transaction, mediums, with whether it be fiat or whatever, do batching. So whose idea why did it take so many years for some guy to go, hey, I got an idea. Can we batch things like everybody else does? And they're just like, genius. My God. And he's just like, I guess I am a genius. It only took us, 8 years to think about that. But Bitcoin transaction batching is the process of unifying several Bitcoin transfers into one more complex transaction. Instead of a single BTC movement taking up all the block itself, such packaging reduces the load that Coinbase puts on the Bitcoin blockchain by more than 50%. And of course, Coinbase isn't necessarily the biggest exchange in the world. They are no joke, and that is going to lower transactions quite a bit. So fees should be going down. Technically, the Bitcoin blockchain should be, maybe again, yeah, probably a little less fees over time. So good for you, Coinbase, for finally getting around to doing that. But again, coin market cap, 169 billion market cap. So we got wiped out. I remember a couple weeks ago making a video on, I just refreshed, it's at 178. So we are going way up super fast. Again, the stock market going up and Bitcoin's going up. So, more time will tell. If we see more big, nasty dips in the stock market and Bitcoin dips with it, it's likely that the whole crypto is very correlated. And that might just be a mindset. It's not necessarily that it's physically correlated because people stop buying this stock goes down, or because people stop buying this, these people stop, manufacturing it, these heavy manufacturers, and therefore their money goes down, their stock goes down. But it might be the mindset, the FUD mindset, that people are correlating them, and they're hitting that sell button when they see the panic in the stock market. And in some ways I can't blame people, but in other ways you need to go, hey, I don't need to sell because it has nothing to do with the stock market. Bitcoin SV, of course, up by 38%. Old Bitcoin SV. But it's very, very late, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very late at night. And I am going to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. So stay tuned for your guys' super awesome stimulus checks, which is basically your tax money just coming right back to you. Sorry about that one. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that good stuff. And as usual, I will see you guys next time.